Billionaire father sees Waitress caring for his disabled son and transforms her life. Rose Olsen sighed as she wiped down another table in the small cafe she had inherited from her mother. The debts were piling up and business was slowing down. Every day in the South Beach neighborhood of Miami. It was during a stormy night that she found a boy in a wheelchair alone under the awning of a closed shop, soaked and shivering from the cold. Rose didn't hesitate. She ran to him with her umbrella, placed her own jacket over his shoulders and brought him inside the cafe. "My goodness, young man. What are you doing alone in the rain?" asked Rose, while serving a hot chocolate to the boy who appeared to be around 12 years old. The boy, with large expressive eyes, smiled shyly. "I got separated from my father. We were walking and I stopped to look at the kittens in the pet shop window, but when I turned around, he wasn't there anymore. Then it started raining." Rose noticed that the boy seemed well educated, and his clothes, though soaked, were of good quality. His accent suggested he might not be from Miami. "What's your name?" she asked, while adjusting the wheelchair so he would be more comfortable. Michael Thompson," he answered, blowing on the hot chocolate. "And your father, Michael, do you have a phone number we can call him with?" The boy made a worried expression. "My cell phone got wet in the rain, and I haven't memorized my father's number." Rose smiled reassuringly. "Don't worry, we'll figure something out. I'm sure he must be looking for you. Is that chocolate good?" Michael nodded with a smile that lit up his face. Rose noticed that, despite the situation, he seemed surprisingly calm. "You make hot chocolate almost as good as Carmen's?" "Who's Carmen?" "Our cook back in New York." Rose realized he must come from a wealthy family. As they talked, she exchanged the damp towel she had placed on the boy's shoulders for a dry one, carefully fixed his wet hair, and checked if he had a fever. What Rose didn't know was that, across the street inside a dark car with tinted windows, Anthony Thompson was watching everything. The 50-year-old businessman, owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, had been distracted by an important call when he realized his son was no longer by his side. The driver had already alerted private security to look for the boy, but it was Anthony himself who spotted him entering the cafe. He was about to cross the street when he saw through the window the care with which that stranger was treating his son. Something made him pause and observe. It had been years since he had seen Michael smile so naturally with a stranger. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now, continuing. Inside the cafe, Rose was serving Michael a sandwich. "You must be hungry, right? It's already past 8 in the evening." "A little," the boy confessed. "We were going to have dinner after visiting the boardwalk." "What are you and your father doing in Miami?" "Vacation." Michael shrugged. "Business, I guess. My father always has business, but he promised we'd go to the beach tomorrow." Rose noticed a shadow of sadness in the boy's eyes. Intuitively, she knew there was more than he was telling. "Do you like the beach?" "I've never really been. Just seen it from a distance," Michael replied, looking at his immobile legs. "With this chair, it's difficult." Rose's heart tightened. She sat down at the table with him. "Nonsense. We have special beach wheelchairs here in Miami. At Palm Beach, there's a program that helps people in wheelchairs get into the ocean. Have you heard of it?" The boy's eyes sparkled. "Really? I could go in the water?" "Of course," Rose smiled. "If your father allows, I can even show you both tomorrow. I work here, but the cafe doesn't open until 10. I have the morning free." Outside, Anthony Thompson continued watching. That simple woman with her worn cafe apron was talking to his son in a way few people did. Without pity, without discomfort, just with naturalness and kindness. Since the accident that left Michael paraplegic 3 years ago, Anthony had noticed how people treated his son differently, with looks of pity or by averting their eyes, as if his condition were contagious. The businessman also noticed that the cafe was practically empty, with only 2 other customers. The Comfort Cafe sign had some burned-out lights, and the facade's paint was peeling. Clearly, the establishment was struggling. Anthony finally decided to enter. The little bell on the door rang, and both Rose and Michael looked toward the entrance. "Dad, exclaimed Michael joyfully. Rose stood up immediately. The man who entered was tall, with a commanding presence, wearing a suit that, even wet from the rain, was obviously extremely expensive. His eyes, identical to Michael's, had a serious expression that softened when he saw his son. "Michael, thank God!" Anthony approached quickly, kneeling beside the wheelchair. "I was worried. What happened?" "Sorry, Dad. I stopped to look at the cats, and when I realized you weren't there anymore, then it started raining and the lady helped me." Anthony's eyes met Rose's. She felt an inexplicable shiver under that intense gaze. "Thank you very much for taking care of my son, Ms. Rose Olson," she answered, extending her hand. And it was nothing. "Michael is a very polite young man." Anthony shook her hand. Rose noticed that despite his businessman appearance, his hands had calluses that indicated he hadn't spent his entire life behind a desk. "Anthony Thompson," he introduced himself. "I'm indebted to you." Rose smiled, a little self-conscious. "There's no debt. Anyone would have done the same." Anthony smiled slightly, a smile that didn't seem frequent on his face. "Believe me, Ms. Rose, not everyone would have." A momentary silence hung between them, broken by Michael. "Dad, Rose said there are special wheelchairs for going to the beach, that there are people who help people like me get in the water. Can we go tomorrow?" Anthony looked surprised, glancing from Michael to Rose. "It's true," she confirmed. "At Palm Beach, there's a program with amphibious chairs. Volunteers help people with reduced mobility enter the ocean." Anthony observed the enthusiasm on his son's face, an expression that had become rare in recent years. "Of course we can go," he answered, to the boy's delight. Then he turned to Rose. "Do you know this program well?" "Yes, I have a friend who volunteers there. If you'd like, I can introduce you. As I told Michael, I'm free tomorrow morning." Anthony hesitated for a moment, as if he wasn't accustomed to accepting help from strangers. But the gleam in his son's eyes convinced him. "That would be very kind. We're staying at the Breakers. I can send a car to pick you up at 8 o'clock would be good," suggested Rose. "Mornings in Miami can be quite hot. It's better to go early." 8 is perfect, Anthony agreed. While the businessman generously paid for Michael's hot chocolate and sandwich, Rose carefully folded a dry towel and handed it to the boy. "For the walk to the car, it's still raining." Anthony observed that simple gesture, so full of consideration. His gaze quickly scanned the nearly empty cafe, the tables slightly worn by time, and returned to Rose's genuine face. "Have you worked here long?" he asked, while they waited for his driver to position the car closer to the entrance. "The cafe was my mother's," Rose answered with a touch of pride in her voice. "I took over after she got sick 5 years ago. It's not much, but it has soul." Anthony nodded thoughtfully. "I can tell." The car arrived, and the driver quickly got out with an umbrella to assist. With a skill that came from practice, Anthony picked up Michael in his arms while the driver folded the wheelchair. The naturalness of that gesture showed Rose that, despite his stern appearance, this man was a dedicated father. "See you tomorrow, Rose," Michael said goodbye, waving. "See you tomorrow, Michael," she smiled, waving back. When the car departed, Rose went back inside the cafe, intrigued by that unexpected encounter. Little did she know that her life would change completely from that rainy night. The next morning, Rose woke up early. She lived in a small apartment behind the cafe, which made her life easier, but also meant she was never really distanced from the business's problems. As she got ready, she thought about the previous night's encounter. There was something about Anthony Thompson that deeply intrigued her, perhaps the way his serious eyes softened when looking at his son, or the respectful way he had treated a simple cafe owner. At precisely 8 o'clock, a black limousine stopped in front of Comfort Cafe. The driver, a middle-aged man with a military posture, rang the doorbell. Rose, who was already waiting on the sidewalk, wearing a light skirt and a simple but elegant blouse, was surprised by the vehicle. "Ms. Olson?" asked the driver. "I'm Paul, Mr. Thompson's driver. He asked me to take you to the hotel." "Thank you, Paul, but all this wasn't necessary. I could have taken a bus or an Uber," she replied, a bit embarrassed as she entered the luxurious car. "Mr. Thompson is very particular about courtesy, ma'am," replied Paul with a small smile. During the short journey to the breakers, Rose observed the Miami streets she knew so well, but which seemed different viewed from inside a limousine. Upon arrival, she was taken directly to the hotel restaurant, where Anthony and Michael were already waiting for her for breakfast. "Rose," Michael smiled when he saw her, his eyes shining with anticipation. "Good morning, Michael. Good morning, Mr. Thompson," she greeted. "Please call me Anthony," he responded, standing to pull out a chair for her. "I hope you like continental breakfast." The table was exquisitely set, with fruits, breads, cheeses, and a variety of foods that Rose rarely saw gathered together. She noticed that some guests were looking curiously at the unusual trio: the elegant businessman, the boy in the wheelchair, and the simple woman who clearly didn't belong in that luxurious environment. "Michael hasn't stopped talking about the beach since yesterday," commented Anthony, pouring coffee for Rose. "I must admit I was surprised. He's usually quite reserved." Rose smiled at the boy. "Some places have the power to spark enthusiasm. In anyone, the Miami Ocean is one of them." During breakfast, Rose learned more about them. Anthony was the owner of Thompson Construction, one of the largest in America, headquartered in New York. He was in Miami to finalize the purchase of a property where he planned to build a business complex. Michael, meanwhile, enthusiastically told her about his school and his friends in New York, though Rose could tell there weren't many. "Since the accident," Anthony began but stopped abruptly, as if he didn't want to touch on the subject. "Since I've been in the chair, some friends disappeared," Michael completed with surprising maturity for his age. "But that's okay. The real one stayed." Rose admired the boy's strength. Without pity or discomfort, she asked, "And what was the accident like, Michael? If you don't mind telling." Michael looked at his father, who nodded discreetly. "It was 3 years ago. We were driving back from Grandpa's farm when a truck hit us." He paused. "Mom was driving." Anthony's face hardened for a moment, and Rose realized there was more to this story. "Was she badly hurt too?" she asked gently. "Mom left after the accident," Michael replied, looking at his plate. "She said she couldn't handle everything." A heavy silence fell over the table. Rose felt her heart ache. That revelation explained a lot about Anthony's protective behavior and Michael's forced maturity. "I'm sorry," she said sincerely. "It's been a while," Anthony replied dryly. Then, as if wanting to change the subject, he checked his watch. "I think it's time we go to the beach, isn't it? Michael has been waiting for this since yesterday." The boy's face lit up again. On the way to Palm Beach, Rose called her friend Lisa, who was a volunteer at the program. When they arrived, they were warmly welcomed by the team, who quickly provided an amphibious chair for Michael. What followed was one of the most exciting mornings in the boy's life. With the help of volunteers and Anthony's attentive supervision, Michael entered the ocean for the first time. Rose watched from the sand the touching scene, the boy laughing openly while feeling the waves, and Anthony by his side, a genuine smile finally making its way onto his serious face. "He seems like a different child," commented Lisa, sitting next to Rose on the sand. "It's amazing how the ocean has that power," replied Rose, not taking her eyes off the scene. "It's not just the ocean, friend," Lisa smiled enigmatically. "I see how he looks at you. It seems Michael has found someone who sees beyond the wheelchair." When they finally came out of the water, Michael was elated. "Did you see, Dad? Did you see how I did it? The waves are warm." Anthony, with his hair and shirt wet, looked rejuvenated. "I saw, son. You were amazing." Michael turned to Rose, who was approaching with towels. "Thank you, Rose. This was the best day of my life." Those simple words deeply touched her heart. As she helped dry the boy's hair, her eyes met Anthony's. In that moment, something silent was shared between them, an understanding, perhaps, a gratitude that went beyond words. The rest of the morning passed quickly. Anthony bought coconut water for everyone, and they stayed on the beach watching the crowd, while Michael animatedly related everything he had felt in the ocean. Around noon, Rose looked at her watch. "I need to go. The cafe opens at 10, but I asked my employee to open today. I can't leave her alone all day. Of course, replied Anthony, looking slightly disappointed. We'll take you back. On the way back, Michael fell asleep in the car, exhausted from the excitement and physical activity. Rose and Anthony talked in low voices. I don't know how to thank you for today, he said. It's been a long time since I've seen Michael so happy. No need to thank me. It was a pleasure, replied Rose sincerely. He's a wonderful boy. Anthony hesitated as if wanting to say something more but held back. When they reached the cafe, he got out of the car to open the door for her. We'll be in Miami for a few more days, he mentioned casually. Perhaps we could come back for coffee? Rose smiled. You'll always be welcome at Comfort Cafe. She waved to Michael, who had woken up and entered the cafe. For the rest of the day, while serving customers and checking the accounts, Rose couldn't stop thinking about that unusual family and the unexpected connection she had felt. What she didn't know was that Anthony Thompson couldn't get her off his mind either. Back at the hotel, while watching Michael sleeping peacefully after lunch, the businessman made a call. Carl, I need you to gather some information for me, he said to his assistant in New York, about a cafe called Comfort Cafe in South Beach and its owner, Rose Olson. 3 days passed with no news from Anthony and Michael. Rose had returned, and to her normal routine, though occasionally she found herself looking at the door every time the bell rang, hoping to see the bright-eyed boy and his reserved father. On the afternoon of the 4th day, while Rose was dealing with a coffee machine that insisted on giving problems, the doorbell rang again. Without turning around, she said, "One moment, please. I'll be with you in a minute." "No rush," replied a familiar voice. Rose turned quickly. Anthony Thompson was standing at the entrance alone, wearing an impeccable suit and carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Thompson, what a surprise," she smiled, drying her hands on her apron. "Michael didn't come with you." "He's having an online class. We don't want him to fall behind in his studies even while traveling," explained Anthony, approaching the counter. "And, please, it's Anthony." Rose nodded, feeling strangely nervous. "What can I get you?" "Black coffee, please," he ordered, sitting on one of the counter stools. While Rose prepared the drink, he looked around the nearly empty cafe. "Business is slow today?" Rose sighed, placing the cup in front of him. "Not just today. It's been like this for the past few months. The pandemic affected many small businesses, and even now, with everything returning to normal, some customers haven't come back." "I understand." Anthony tasted the coffee. "This is excellent coffee. Strong. As it should be. Thank you. The recipe was my mother's. She was strict about quality." Anthony placed the cup on the saucer and opened the briefcase he had brought. "Rose, I'll be direct. I came here for 2 reasons. First, to thank you again for what you did for Michael. That day at the beach meant a lot to him. To both of us, actually." Rose smiled, touched. "And the second reason?" Anthony took some papers from the briefcase. "The second is a proposal. I've been researching this cafe and you. I know that debts are piling up, and that the building was recently put up for sale by the owner." Rose paled. "How do you know that?" "I have resources to obtain information when necessary," he replied calmly. "I also know that you have a degree in business administration, although you've never formally practiced the profession." Rose crossed her arms, feeling exposed and a little irritated. "And why exactly did you investigate my life?" Anthony wasn't intimidated by her irritation. "Because I saw something in you that's rare these days, Rose. I saw genuine empathy, initiative, and intelligence. I saw the way you handled my son without pity or discomfort, and that intrigued me." He slid the papers across the counter to her. "I'm buying this building, and I want to offer you a choice. Continue managing the cafe with fair rent and financing for renovations, or..." He paused. "Accept a position at Thompson Construction in our new project in Miami." Rose looked at the papers in front of her, stunned. "What kind of position?" "Social Responsibility Coordinator. We're starting a new division focused on accessibility and social integration projects. Your knowledge about the beach program and your evident ability to deal with people would be valuable." Rose couldn't believe what she was hearing. Is this serious, or is it some kind of charity? Anthony's gaze hardened slightly. I don't do charity in business, Rose. I make investments, and I believe investing in you would be good for my company. Rose needed to lean on the counter. It was as if a hurricane had entered her life in less than a week. I need time to think, she said finally. Naturally, Anthony took a card from his pocket and placed it on top of the papers. My personal number. Call when you've made a decision. We'll be in Miami for 3 more days. He finished his coffee, left a generous tip, and stood to leave. At the door, he turned. Michael asked if you could have dinner with us tomorrow night, regardless of your decision about the proposal. 7 o'clock at the hotel. Before Rose could respond, he left, leaving her alone with a proposal that could completely change the course of her life. That night, after closing the cafe, Rose stayed awake for hours thinking about Anthony's offer. On one hand, Comfort Cafe was her heritage, her mother's legacy. On the other, the debts were accumulating, and she knew that in a few months she could lose everything anyway. Anthony's proposal would ensure the cafe's survival, or give her a completely new career. More than that, there was Michael. In just a few meetings, she had developed a special affection for the boy, and as for Anthony, Rose couldn't deny that she felt something inexplicable when she was near him, a mix of intimidation and fascination. The next morning, Rose called her best friend Caroline, a psychologist who always gave her good advice. He investigated, "Your life without permission, Rose. Doesn't that raise a red flag for you?" questioned Caroline after hearing the whole story. "Looking at it that way, yes," admitted Rose. "But I also understand that he's a cautious businessman, especially when it comes to people who approach his son." "And are you going to the dinner?" Rose sighed. "I am, at least to give an answer in person. And honestly, I want to see Michael again." "Just be careful," warned Caroline. "Rich and powerful men are used to getting what they want." Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now continuing, at 7 o'clock sharp, Rose arrived at the Breakers restaurant. She had carefully chosen a simple but elegant blue dress, the best she had in her wardrobe. She felt nervous entering the sophisticated environment, but soon spotted Michael enthusiastically waving from a table near the window. Anthony stood when he saw her. "Rose," exclaimed Michael happily, "I'm so glad you came." "I'm glad to see you too, Michael," she smiled, as Anthony pulled out a chair for her. "You look very elegant tonight," he observed in a tone that made her blush slightly. The dinner went pleasantly. Michael dominated the conversation, animatedly telling her about everything he had done in the past few days. A boat trip in Biscayne Bay, a visit to the Statue of Liberty, and another day at the beach with the amphibious chair. "And tomorrow we're going to the Miami Observation Tower," he concluded. "Don't you want to come with us, Rose?" Rose exchanged a quick glance with Anthony. "I can't tomorrow, Michael. I have a cafe to run, remember?" A momentary silence fell over the table until Anthony cleared his throat softly. "Michael, why don't you order that chocolate dessert you liked yesterday?" Understanding the cue, the boy called a waiter, giving the adults a moment to talk. "Have you thought about my proposal?" asked Anthony, direct as always. Rose nodded. "I've thought a lot, and I have some questions if you don't mind." "Of course. Why me? There are many qualified professionals you could hire for this position." Anthony took a sip of wine before answering. "Qualified professionals are easy to find. People who see beyond appearances and treat others with genuine humanity are much rarer." His eyes met hers. "The way you treated Michael from the very first, a moment, without embarrassment, without excessive pity, just with respect and naturalness, that's something that's not taught in business schools." Rose felt the weight of those words. "And what about the cafe? As I said, you can keep it with my financial support, hire a manager, and work in both places if you want, or you can sell it if you prefer a fresh start." Rose took a deep breath. "I accept the position at the construction company, but I want to keep the cafe. It was my mother's dream, and I can't simply abandon it." A small smile appeared on Anthony's face. "Wise decision. We can sort out the details tomorrow at the temporary office I've set up at the hotel. As for the cafe, I have some ideas to revitalize it if you're open to suggestions." Michael's dessert arrived, interrupting the conversation. The boy could barely contain his excitement. "So, Rose, are you going to work with my dad? Are you moving to New York?" Rose looked at Anthony, surprised. "New York? I thought the project would be here in Miami." Anthony gave his son a warning look. "Part of the work will be in Miami, yes, but the company headquarters is in New York, and you'd need to spend some time there for training and to meet the team. We were going to discuss these details tomorrow." Rose felt a twinge of apprehension. Leaving Miami, even temporarily, wasn't in her plans. "Don't worry," continued Anthony, noticing her hesitation. "We'll provide everything, apartment, transportation, and you can return to Miami whenever necessary to supervise the cafe." The rest of the dinner was pleasant, but Rose couldn't completely shake the feeling that she was being subtly manipulated into accepting conditions that hadn't been clearly presented from the beginning. Still, as she said goodbye to Michael and saw the joy on the boy's face upon learning she would work with his father, Rose felt that perhaps it was worth taking this leap of faith. "I'll expect you tomorrow at 10 a.m. at the office," said Anthony, as they said goodbye at the hotel entrance. "And Rose, thank you for your trust." As she walked away, she heard Michael say to his father, "I like her, Dad, I really do." The next morning, Rose arrived punctually at the hotel. She was led to a suite transformed into a temporary office, where Anthony awaited her along with a younger man who was introduced as Carl, his personal assistant. "Rose, welcome," greeted Anthony, indicating a chair. "Carl brought all the necessary documents for your hiring from New York." The next 2 hours were dedicated to explanations about the company, the new project in Miami, and her specific role. The position was, in fact, much broader and more important than Rose had initially imagined. She would be responsible not only for coordinating social projects, but for developing an entirely new accessibility and inclusion policy for the company's developments. "Your first major project will be this," explained Anthony, showing her the plans for a huge commercial and residential complex that would be built on a property in downtown Miami. "We want it to be a model of accessibility and social integration." Rose examined the plans, impressed with the scale of the project. "This is ambitious." "Thompson Construction doesn't do anything halfway," replied Anthony with a slight smile. "As for the cafe, I have some ideas to integrate it into one of our future projects, transforming it into a model space for an inclusive establishment. But we can discuss that after you settle in New York." By the end of the meeting, Rose had signed a contract with a salary that was more than 10 times what she earned at the cafe. Carl handed her a new corporate cell phone and a laptop. "Your flight to New York is scheduled for Sunday. That gives you 3 days to organize your things here in Miami," informed Carl. "An apartment has already been arranged in the company complex near the central office. Do you have any questions?" Rose felt slightly dazed by the speed of events. "What about the cafe? Who will manage it while I'm away?" "We've already taken care of that," replied Anthony. "We've temporarily hired an experienced manager who will take over while you're in New York. Martha will continue as your trusted employee overseeing everything." Rose nodded, impressed with the efficiency with which Anthony resolved practical issues. At the same time, part of her wondered if she wasn't handing over control of her life too quickly to a man she barely knew. The next 3 days passed in a whirlwind. Rose organized the cafe, explained the situation to Martha, who was happy with the opportunity for business improvement, and packed her things in her small apartment. Caroline helped her with the suitcases, still expressing concern. "Are you sure you're not going too fast, Rose? You barely know this man." "I'm signing a contract with a respectable company, not marrying him, Caroline," replied Rose, though the comparison made her blush. "Besides, it's a unique opportunity. If it doesn't work out, I can always come back." On Sunday morning, Rose was surprised to see not just a driver, but Anthony himself and Michael in front of the cafe, ready to take her to the airport. "You didn't have to come," she said, genuinely touched. "Of course we did," replied Michael, enthusiastically. "You're going to work with my dad and live near us. We're almost family now." The word family had a strange effect on Rose, who quickly looked at Anthony. He seemed slightly embarrassed by his son's enthusiasm. "Michael is very excited about the idea of having you in New York," he explained. "To be honest, so am I. I'm Sure, your contribution will be valuable to the company. The trip to New York marked the beginning of a new phase in Rose's life. The apartment provided by the company was luxurious, much larger and more elegant than anywhere she had ever lived. On her first day of work, she was introduced to a team of young architects and engineers who would work under her coordination on the accessibility project. Sandra Miller, the Human Resources Director, gave her the official welcome. Anthony rarely hires someone directly without going through the company's normal processes, commented Sandra with an appraising look. You must have really impressed him. Rose immediately realized that she would be closely observed and that she would need to prove her worth beyond the unusual circumstances of her hiring. In the following weeks, Rose immersed herself in work. Her days were filled with meetings, studies on accessibility and inclusion, and the gradual development of a comprehensive proposal for the downtown project. At night, she often received updates about the cafe, which was surprisingly starting to recover under the management of the manager hired by Anthony. Anthony was frequently traveling on business, but Michael made a point of keeping in touch. At least once a week, Rose was invited to dinner at the Thompson Mansion, an imposing house in one of New York's most exclusive neighborhoods. On these occasions, she learned more about the boys' daily life and was surprised by the simplicity of the family dynamic, despite all the wealth. My dad works a lot, Michael confided during one of these dinners, while Anthony took an important call in the other room. Since Mom left, he's never been the same. He hardly ever smiled until, encouraged Rose, until he met you, completed the boy with a smile. He smiles more now and talks more too. Rose felt a warmth rise to her face. She couldn't deny that she also thought a lot about Anthony, though she tried to keep her feelings under control. Their relationship was professional, she repeated to herself, even if she occasionally caught Anthony observing her in a way that suggested something more. After 2 months in New York, Rose presented her first major project to the board of Thompson. Construction. It was an innovative proposal to make the downtown complex not only accessible for people with disabilities, but truly inclusive, with spaces designed for social integration and valuing human diversity. The presentation was a success. The directors applauded her ideas, and Anthony seemed genuinely impressed. Exactly why I hired you, he said during the celebration in his office after everyone left. You see the human needs behind the projects. Rose smiled, feeling professionally fulfilled for the first time in years. Thank you for the opportunity. I still sometimes wonder why you trusted a stranger you met in a cafe so much. Anthony gazed at her for a moment, his intense look making her look away. Perhaps because, in some rare cases, you simply know you can trust someone from the first moment. There was a brief silence loaded with meaning, broken by the ring of Anthony's cell phone. Sorry, I need to take this, he said. It's about Michael. He has a presentation at school today, and I promised I'd be there. Of course, replied Rose. Give him a hug for me. As she watched Anthony leave, Rose reflected on how drastically her life had changed in just 2 months. From the owner of an indebted cafe in Miami, she was now a respected executive at one of the largest construction companies in the country. And, more surprisingly, she had grown close to Michael and Anthony in a way she could no longer ignore. However, not everything was rosy. Rose was beginning to notice hostile looks from some colleagues, especially from Maurice Vanderbilt, the financial director, who seemed to constantly question her decisions and her presence in the company. He had been particularly critical during the presentation, asking questions that clearly aimed to diminish her. The week after the presentation, Rose was working late in her office when Sandra, the HR director, appeared at her door. Can we talk? Asked Sandra, closing the door behind her. It's about your position here. Rose felt a chill in her stomach. Is there a problem? Sandra sat down, looking uncomfortable. Rose, you were hired by Anthony under unusual circumstances, and there are people in the company wondering about the exact nature of your relationship with him. Rose blushed, both from anger and embarrassment. My relationship with Mr. Thompson is strictly professional. Sandra raised her hands in a pacifying gesture. I'm not suggesting otherwise. I'm just warning you that there are rumors and that Maurice is particularly bothered by your growing influence over Anthony. He's been financial director for 15 years and has always had the final word on major investments. Your downtown project was approved despite his reservations about the costs. Rose felt her stomach sink. The last thing she wanted was to be seen as a favorite, or worse, as someone who used questionable means to advance professionally. What do you suggest I do? Maintain appropriate distance, be extremely professional, and work twice as hard to prove your worth, regardless of who hired you. After Sandra left, Rose remained in her office for a long time, reflecting. She had worked hard in recent weeks, dedicating herself completely to the project. The idea that people might question her competence or integrity was painful. That night, when she returned to her apartment, Rose found a message from Anthony, inviting her to dinner on Saturday to celebrate Michael's birthday. After long reflection, she replied accepting the invitation, but adding that it might be better to reduce social meetings for a while, to avoid misunderstandings in the company. The response came quickly. I understand your concerns. We'll talk on Saturday. Michael's 13th birthday was an intimate celebration, with only his paternal, grandparents, a few school friends, and Rose present. She brought as a gift a book about oceanography, an interest the boy had developed since his experience in the Miami Ocean. It's amazing, exclaimed Michael upon opening the gift. How did you know I was interested in this? You mention the ocean in practically all our conversations, smiled Rose, and your father mentioned that you've been researching the subject. The look Anthony gave her at that moment contained something more than simple gratitude. There was a silent admission that he also noticed every little detail about her. After the guests left and Michael went to bed, Anthony invited Rose for a glass of wine on the mansion's terrace. The place offered a panoramic view of New York, with its lights shining in the night. So, you're worried about rumors in the company? He asked directly, after a few minutes of casual conversation. Rose sighed. Sandra warned me that there are people questioning my hiring and my closeness to you. Anthony took a sip of wine, thoughtfully. Maurice, I presume. He's always been territorial. Not just him, and they're not completely wrong, Anthony. My hiring was unusual, and we have been spending a lot of time together. Because work and family sometimes mix in my life, he replied, calmly. Michael has grown attached to you, and I value your work and your company. The way he said the last word made Rose feel a shiver. Still, perhaps we should be more cautious. Anthony put his glass on the table and turned to face her directly. Rose, let me be clear. I hired you because I saw your potential. Your project proved I was right. What other people think or speculate doesn't change that. He paused, seeming to carefully choose his next words. As for the rest, the dinners, our conversations, that's between us. And Michael, of course. Rose felt her heart race. There was a growing intimacy between them that could no longer be ignored. Anthony, He gently raised his hand to stop her. We don't need to define anything now. I just want you to know that what's happening here, he gestured between them, isn't just professional for me, but I respect if it's only that for you. Rose didn't know what to answer. The truth was that her feelings for Anthony had grown in unexpected ways. There was something in the combination of his strength and vulnerability, especially when it came to Michael, that deeply touched her. It's not just professional for me either, she finally admitted, almost in a whisper, but it's complicated. I work for you. I've just started a new career and there's Michael. Michael adores you, replied Anthony with a slight smile. As for the rest, we can figure it out with time. I'm not asking for a decision now. He came closer and gently took her hand. What I'm asking is that you don't pull away because of corporate rumors. You've earned your place at Thompson by your own merit. Rose nodded, feeling a mix of relief and anxiety. It was comforting to know that Anthony shared her feelings, but this only added another layer of complexity to her new life. When she returned to her apartment that night, Rose felt torn between the excitement of the possibilities opening in her life and the fear that everything could crumble as quickly as it had been built. The following Monday, Rose arrived early, at the office, determined to work even harder to prove her worth. She was absorbed in some documents when her phone rang. It was Martha, her employee from the cafe in Miami. "Rose, sorry to bother you, but I think you need to come to Miami as soon as possible." Martha's voice sounded worried. "What happened?" "The manager that Mr. Thompson hired. He's making changes to the cafe without consulting anyone. Changed the menu, the hours, even the decoration. And when I questioned him, he said he had authorization from the construction company's board." Rose felt her blood boil. The cafe was her heritage, her connection to her mother's memory. No one had the right to transform it without her approval. "I'll be there tomorrow morning," she promised. After hanging up, Rose immediately went to Anthony's office, only to discover that he was on a business trip and wouldn't return for 2 days. Determined not to wait, she informed her team that she would need to go to Miami for a few days and bought a ticket for the first flight the next morning. When she arrived at Comfort Cafe on Tuesday, Rose barely recognized the place. The welcoming walls in warm tones had been painted a modern cold gray. Most of the old furniture, full of history, had been replaced with contemporary pieces. Even the traditional sign had given way to a minimalist design that simply said, "Comfort." "What happened here?" she asked Martha, who greeted her with a relieved hug. Philip, the manager, said they were direct orders from Mr. Vanderbilt, the construction company's financial director. A whole team arrived 2 weeks ago and transformed everything in 3 days. "Maurice Vanderbilt?" Rose felt a chill. "He has no authority over the cafe." "He showed documents," Rose said, "that now the cafe is part of a pilot project of the construction company and that you had been consulted." Rose tried to stay calm, but inside she was furious. It was obvious that Morris was using the cafe to get at her, knowing the sentimental value the place had for her. Philip, the manager, appeared at that moment, a young man in a suit, with an arrogant attitude who seemed disconcerted to see her. "Ms. Olson, we weren't expecting you." "Clearly," replied Rose dryly. "I want to see these documents that authorize changes to my cafe." Philip hesitated, but brought a folder with papers that, to Rose's surprise, contained Anthony's digital signature, authorizing the modernization of the cafe as part of an urban revitalization project. "This doesn't make sense," she murmured, confused. "Anthony would never do this without consulting me." Philip cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Mr. Vanderbilt mentioned that Mr. Thompson is busy with larger projects and delegated some minor decisions to him. The cafe is just a small investment in the construction company's portfolio." Small investment. The words hurt Rose. For the construction company, Comfort Cafe might be insignificant, but for her it represented everything. Her past, her present, and until recently her future. Determined to clarify the situation, Rose tried to call Anthony, but her calls went to voicemail. She sent messages that went unanswered. Frustrated, she contacted Carl, the assistant, who only said that Anthony was in important meetings in Washington, D.C. and couldn't be disturbed. Rose spent the next 2 days at the cafe, trying to understand the extent of the changes. Beyond appearance, the traditional menu had been replaced with more gourmet options, and prices had risen considerably, driving away the neighborhood's regular customers. The old employees, except Martha, had been replaced by young hipsters, who seemed more concerned with aesthetics than with the warm service that had always been the place's trademark. On Thursday, when Rose was already considering returning to New York to confront Maurice directly, she received a surprising call. "Rose?" Michael's voice sounded worried. "Are you okay? We haven't seen you for days." "I'm in Miami, Michael," she replied, touched by the boy's concern. "There were some problems at the cafe that I needed to resolve." "In Miami?" He seemed surprised. "Dad didn't mention you were traveling." "I couldn't talk to him before I came. He's on a business trip from what I was told." There was a strange pause. "Rose, my dad isn't on a trip. He's been here at home since yesterday." Rose felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. Anthony was deliberately avoiding her calls. Perhaps he really had authorized the changes to the cafe without consulting her. "Michael, when your father arrives, can you tell him I really need to talk to him? It's important." "Sure, he's arriving now. Do you want me to pass the phone?" Before Rose could answer, she heard Anthony's voice in the background, asking who Michael was talking to. There was a brief, muffled dialogue, and then Anthony was on the line. "Rose? Where are you? Carl said you took some unexpected days off." The genuine surprise in his voice confused her even more. "I'm in Miami, at my cafe, which is completely transformed without my knowledge or consent." There was a heavy silence on the other end. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about grey walls, new furniture, gourmet menu, and different employees, all authorized by you, apparently, according to documents that Maurice provided." Another silence, followed by a heavy sigh. "Rose, I didn't authorize any of that. I don't know what documents those are, but they must be forged. But they have your digital signature, which Maurice has access to for corporate matters." Anthony now sounded genuinely angry. "Come back to New York immediately. We'll resolve this here." "I'm not going anywhere until I understand what's happening with my cafe," replied Rose, equally angry. "This place is my mother's legacy, Anthony. It's not just a small investment in the construction company's portfolio." "Who said that? The manager that you or Maurice hired?" Anthony cursed softly. "Rose, trust me. Come back to New York tomorrow. I promise we'll resolve this together. And please, don't confront Maurice alone. There's more at stake here than you imagine." Something in the urgency of his voice made her agree, reluctantly. After hanging up, Rose sat in one of the cafe's new uncomfortable chairs, feeling betrayed and confused. Her new life, which had seemed so promising, now showed its complexities and dangers. She was in a corporate power game for which she wasn't prepared, and the price could be too high. The next morning, Rose boarded for New York, torn between anger and hope that Anthony really wasn't involved in the cafe's transformations. On the way to the airport, she received a message from him asking her to meet him directly at his house. Not at the office as soon as she arrived. Upon landing in New York, Rose was surprised to see not the usual driver, but Anthony himself waiting for her in the arrival hall. His face looked tired and worried. "We need to talk privately," he said, briefly hugging her. "The situation is more complex than we imagined." In the car, as they headed to the Thompson mansion, Anthony explained, "Maurice has been trying to bring me down for years. He wanted to be CEO, but my father, before retiring, ensured the position would be mine. Since then, he's been looking for ways to discredit me before the board." Rose listened attentively, still uncertain about where her cafe fit into this scenario. "And why would messing with my cafe be part of that strategy?" "Because he realized how important you've become to me, both personally and professionally," replied Anthony, looking at her intensely. "He's using the cafe to get at you and through you to get at me." When they arrived at the mansion, they found Michael in the living room, visibly anxious. "Rose," he exclaimed, approaching in his wheelchair. "What happened to the cafe? Dad's been very angry since yesterday." "Everything's fine, Michael," Rose reassured him, though she was far from believing that. "Just some work problems." Anthony asked his son to let them talk alone and took Rose to his private office. There he showed her some documents on his computer. "Look at this. Maurice has been using my digital signature to authorize several questionable transactions in recent months. Small enough not to draw immediate attention, but when added up, they represent a considerable diversion of resources." Rose examined the documents, shocked. "Are you saying he's embezzling money from the company?" Anthony nodded grimly. "I've been suspicious for some time, but I didn't have concrete evidence. That's why I discreetly hired an external audit. When you started working directly with me, and your project gained prominence, I think he felt threatened and decided to act more aggressively." "Using my cafe as a target," completed Rose, feeling a mixture of anger and relief at knowing Anthony wasn't involved. "Exactly. He probably expected you to return furiously to New York, accusing me, which would create an internal scandal." Rose frowned. "And how will we prove that the signature on the cafe documents was forged?" "I'm already taking care of that. Carl is gathering evidence and will confront Maurice at the board meeting on Monday." He held her hands. "Until then, we need to be extremely careful. If Maurice suspects we know, he might try something more drastic." Rose nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. Anthony hesitated for a moment, then continued. "There's something else I need to tell you, something few people know. His serious tone made Rose apprehensive. "What?" "I'm sick, Rose. I have a heart condition that I inherited from my father. In recent months, it's gotten worse." Rose felt her heart skip a beat. "How serious is it?" "Serious enough that I've started thinking about who will take care of Michael if something happens to me," he replied, his voice slightly choked. His mother made it clear she doesn't want that responsibility. Now everything made more sense to Rose. Anthony's urgency to find trustworthy people, his desire to have someone close to Michael who truly understood him. "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I need you to understand everything that's at stake. It's not just about the cafe or your position in the company. Maurice knows about my condition and is betting that he'll soon be able to take control. If he manages to bring me down before that, he'll control everything, including Michael's future." The weight of those revelations hit Rose hard. What had begun as a professional opportunity now involved much more. Questions of trust, loyalty, and possibly even love. "What can we do?" she finally asked. Anthony gently squeezed her hands. "Trust each other and fight." The weekend passed at the Thompson mansion, with Rose, Anthony, and Carl carefully planning how to confront Maurice at the board meeting. Michael, sensing the tension, did his best to cheer everyone up with his natural optimism, though he clearly knew something serious was happening. On Monday morning, as they prepared to go to the office, Rose's cell phone rang. It was Martha from the cafe in a panic. "Rose, they just emptied the cafe. A truck arrived and they're taking everything away. Furniture, equipment, everything." "What? Who authorized this?" "A man in a suit said they're orders from the owner, that the cafe will be demolished for a new development. They have documents, Rose." Rose looked at Anthony, horrified. "Maurice is taking everything from the cafe. He says it's going to be demolished." Anthony took the phone. "Martha, call the police. Say it's a theft in progress. We're heading to Miami immediately." After hanging up, he turned to Rose. "He's desperate. He must have discovered about the audit. This is good." "Good, he's destroying my cafe. It means we have more evidence against him now," explained Anthony, already calling his private pilot. "The jet will be ready in an hour." "An hour? It might be too late by then." Anthony held her by the shoulders. "Rose, trust me. We'll resolve this. We'll save your cafe and finish Maurice once and for all." The flight to Miami was tense. Rose alternated between anxiety about the cafe and concern for Anthony, who occasionally pressed his chest discreetly but noticeably. When they finally landed, a car was already waiting for them. When they arrived at Comfort Cafe, they found the police on site and a small commotion. The moving trucks were parked, and a man in a suit was arguing heatedly with the officers. "That's Maurice's lawyer," murmured Anthony, quickly getting out of the car. Rose looked at the cafe. The facade was intact, but through the windows she could see that the interior had been partially emptied. Martha ran to her, crying. "They've already taken almost everything from the kitchen. I tried to stop them, but they had documents." Anthony approached the lawyer and the police officers, his imposing presence immediately drawing attention. "I'm Anthony Thompson, CEO of Thompson Construction. This establishment is under my protection. Any documents presented are fraudulent." The lawyer paled upon recognizing him. "Mr. Thompson, there's a misunderstanding. We're just following orders from Mr. Vanderbilt, who said he had your authorization to—" "My authorization?" interrupted Anthony, his voice dangerously calm. "Show me these documents." While the lawyer nervously searched his briefcase, Anthony turned to the police officers. "Officers, I formally request that you stop this removal. I'm prepared to present legitimate documents proving that this establishment will not be demolished, and that Ms. Olsen has legal rights over its operation." The police officers, impressed both by the Thompson name and Anthony's confidence, agreed. Maurice's lawyer tried to protest, but it was in vain. "As for you," Anthony addressed him, "I suggest you inform Mr. Vanderbilt that he is officially removed from his duties at Thompson Construction, and that a criminal investigation for fraud and forgery will be initiated today." The lawyer quickly retreated, visibly shaken. The truck workers began returning the items that had already been removed. Rose observed everything with a mixture of relief and admiration. Anthony had taken control of the situation with an authority that left no room for questioning. However, when he turned to her, his face was pale and he staggered slightly. "Anthony?" She ran to him, concerned. "I'm fine," he tried to assure, but his voice was weak. "Just a little tired." Rose didn't believe him. She helped him sit in one of the few chairs left in the cafe while asking Martha to bring water. "You need a doctor," she insisted, noticing the cold sweat on his forehead. "No," he firmly refused. "Not now. We're not finished yet." During the next hour, while items were being returned to the cafe, Anthony made several calls mobilizing the company's board against Maurice. Rose remained by his side, divided between gratitude for his intervention and growing concern for his health. When finally everything was resolved and the police officers left, Anthony and Rose were alone in the partially disorganized cafe. Martha had gone to get something for them to eat, understanding that they needed privacy. "Thank you," said Rose, sitting across from him. "You saved my cafe." Anthony smiled tiredly. "It was the least I could do. This place means a lot to you." "And you?" she asked softly. "What do I mean to you?" He looked at her intensely. "You once asked me why I trusted a stranger I met in a cafe. The truth is that I never considered you a stranger, Rose. From the moment I saw how you treated Michael, I felt like I already knew you. And the more I know you, the more certain I am that it wasn't chance that brought us together." Rose felt, her heart race. "Anthony, your health. It's precarious, but I'm not dying tomorrow," he smiled slightly. "The doctors say that with the right treatment and less stress, I can still live a long time. That's why I need to resolve this situation with Maurice definitively." "And what about us?" asked Rose, finally verbalizing the question that had hung between them for weeks. Anthony extended his hand across the table, gently touching hers. "It depends on you. I know everything happened very fast. You were thrown into my world with its complications and dangers. I would completely understand if you wanted to step back." "And if I don't want to step back," she replied, turning her hand to intertwine her fingers with his. A genuine smile illuminated Anthony's tired face. "Then we would take one step at a time. No rush, building something solid based on trust and mutual respect." Rose nodded, feeling a deep emotion. In just a few months, her life had transformed in ways she never imagined possible. The future was still uncertain, with many challenges ahead, but for the first time in years, she felt truly hopeful. "One step at a time," she agreed. Dear listener, if you're enjoying this story, please take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It really helps those of us who are just starting out. Now continuing. The following week, Anthony and Rose confronted Maurice at the board meeting of Thompson Construction. With the evidence collected by the external audit and the cafe incident, there was no way the financial director could deny his actions. "You're sick, Anthony," Maurice argued desperately. "The company needs strong leadership, someone who can't be distracted by personal complications." His disdainful look at Rose made it clear who he was referring to. Anthony remained calm. "My health is a legitimate concern, which I've never hidden from the board. We already have succession plans in progress. What we can't have is someone willing to commit fraud and forgery to advance personally." The board was unanimous. Maurice was immediately removed, and a formal investigation would be conducted to determine the extent of his fraudulent actions. After the meeting, Anthony seemed exhausted but relieved. "We need to celebrate," he said to Rose. "Perhaps dinner, just the three of us. You, me, and Michael." Rose smiled, but her expression soon became serious. "First, I think you should consult your doctors. All this stress can't be good for your condition." Anthony nodded, acknowledging the legitimate concern. "You're right. I'll schedule appointments tomorrow." The results of Anthony's exams weren't encouraging. His heart condition had worsened with the stress of recent events, and doctors recommended surgery in the coming weeks. Rose was by his side when he received the news. "The doctors are optimistic," said Anthony, trying to sound confident. "The surgery has a high success rate." Rose squeezed his hand in support. "And then I'll need to radically change my lifestyle. Less work, less stress. I'll need to delegate more responsibilities." A determined gleam appeared in his eyes. "Perhaps it's time to transform Thompson Construction into something different, something more aligned with the projects you've been developing, constructions that really matter, that make a difference in people's lives. Rose felt touched by the way Anthony had absorbed and adopted her ideas. Sounds like an excellent plan for the future. For our future, he gently corrected, looking into her eyes. If you want. The night before the surgery, Anthony invited Rose to dinner at his home. Michael had been sent to spend the night at his grandparents' house, as Anthony wanted a private conversation. Dinner was served on the terrace, under the stars. There were candles, flowers, and an air of serenity that contrasted with the tension of recent days. "It feels like a real date," commented Rose with a slight smile. "That was the intention," replied Anthony. "I realized that, with all the craziness since we met, we never really had one." The conversation flowed naturally between them, about plans for the future, about the cafe that would be fully restored, about Michael and his growing passion for the ocean. Only at the end of the evening did Anthony approach the more serious subject. "Rose, tomorrow I go into surgery. The doctors are optimistic, but there are always risks." She tried to interrupt him, but he continued. "Please, let me finish. I've prepared some documents that I'd like you to sign. In case of complications, they would ensure that you maintain your position in the company and full ownership of the cafe regardless of anything." Rose felt a lump in her throat. "Don't talk like that, you'll be fine." "Probably," he smiled, "but I need to know that you and Michael will be protected either way." He hesitated for a moment, then continued. "I've also prepared documents giving you shared custody of Michael, in case something happens to me. I know it seems rushed, but is this a proposal?" interrupted Rose, trying to ease the tension with humor, though her eyes were misty. Anthony laughed softly. "Not exactly. When I make a real proposal, there will be no doubts. This is just precaution." He took her hands in his. "In such a short time, you've become essential in our lives, Rose. Michael adores you, and I think my feelings are quite clear." Rose felt silent tears sliding down her face. "Mine too," she whispered. That night, they sealed their commitment with a gentle kiss, full of promises for the future. Rose signed the documents, not out of concern for her position or the cafe, but because she understood how much it meant to Anthony, the certainty that his son and the woman he loved would be protected. The next morning, Rose and Michael waited together in the hospital waiting room while Anthony was prepared for surgery. The boy was surprisingly calm. "He'll be fine," said Michael, with conviction. "Dad is strong, and now he has more reasons to live." Rose looked at the boy, amazed by his maturity. "You're right, he has you." Michael smiled. "And he has you too. He smiles a lot more since he met you. Did you know he keeps the photo from the day we went to the beach together on his phone?" Rose felt her heart warm with that revelation. The idea that Anthony kept that memory so close was touching. The surgery lasted 6 hours. During that time, Rose and Michael talked, played card games she had brought, and occasionally walked the hospital corridors to ease their anxiety. Carl and other company executives called several times for updates. Finally, the doctor appeared, looking tired but satisfied. "The surgery was a success," he announced. "We encountered some challenges, but we managed to overcome them. Mr. Thompson is a lucky man." Michael hugged Rose tightly, tears of relief streaming down his face. "I knew it. I knew he'd be okay." The recovery period was long. Anthony spent 2 weeks in the hospital, followed by months of rest and rehabilitation at home. During this time, Rose divided herself between New York and Miami, supervising both the company and the cafe's restoration. Michael, in his characteristic determination, decided that his father needed a nurse on duty and practically moved into Anthony's room, reading to him, playing chess, and reporting the news that Rose brought from the company. During one of these visits, 3 months after the surgery, Rose arrived carrying a small model. "What's this?" asked Anthony, much stronger now, sitting in his bed with Michael by his side. "The future of Comfort Cafe," she replied, placing the model on the bed. It was a detailed representation of the cafe, maintaining its traditional facade, but expanded to include a large space in the back. The interior details showed a fully accessible environment, with ramps, braille signage, and adapted spaces. The idea is to transform comfort into a model-inclusive cafe where people with any type of disability can feel truly welcomed, explained Rose. We also plan to hire employees with various disabilities. Michael's eyes shone with enthusiasm. And there will be a space just for events, lectures, and workshops about inclusion, he added. I helped plan it. Anthony looked from the model to Rose and Michael, visibly moved. You worked on this together? Michael has brilliant ideas, confirmed Rose. The suggestion to partner with organizations like the one that helped us at the beach was his. Anthony put his arm around his son's shoulders, pulling him close. I'm very proud of you, son. Then he turned his gaze to Rose. Of both of you, this is exactly the kind of project I want Thompson Construction to prioritize. Constructions with purpose that truly transform lives. 6 months after the surgery, Anthony was sufficiently recovered to return to a partial work routine. As promised to the doctors, he delegated many responsibilities, restructuring the company so he could focus only on the most important strategic decisions. The inauguration of the new Comfort Cafe was scheduled to coincide with his official return. The event became a celebration not just of the cafe's revitalization, but of a new phase for all of them. The night before the grand opening, Anthony, Rose, and Michael walked along South Beach, enjoying the tranquility before the next day's excitement. Who would have thought that a chance encounter on a rainy night would change our lives this way? Commented Anthony, watching Michael a little ahead, skillfully maneuvering his wheelchair on the sidewalk. Rose smiled, squeezing his hand. I didn't always believe in destiny, but I'm starting to change my mind. Anthony stopped, turning to face her directly. Remember that night before the surgery, when you asked if I was making a proposal? Rose nodded, feeling her heart race. I said that when I made a real proposal, there would be no doubts, he continued, then knelt on the sand, taking a small box from his pocket. I hope this time there's no doubt about my intentions. He opened the box, revealing a delicate ring with a blue stone, the color of the ocean. Rose Olson, you've transformed my life and Michael's in ways I never imagined possible. We've known each other for only a year, but it feels like I've known you my whole life. You showed me that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to build something new and better from the ruins of the past. Will you marry me? Tears of happiness streamed down Rose's face. Before she could answer, she heard Michael's voice. Say yes, Rose, please say yes. The boy had silently approached and was watching the scene with a huge smile on his face. Rose looked at the two men who had become so important in her life in such a short time. Yes, she finally answered, her voice choked with emotion. Yes, I will. Anthony placed the ring on her finger and stood to embrace her. Michael approached, and the three engaged in a family hug that sealed a promise of future together. The next day, the new Comfort Cafe was inaugurated with great celebration. The facade maintained its original charm, but a modern and elegant sign announced, Comfort Cafe, a place for everyone. The interior had been completely adapted to be accessible, with ramps, braille menus, and a diverse team that included people with different types of disabilities. But the most important aspect, the human warmth and welcoming service that had always been the place's trademark, remained intact. Rose circulated among the guests, receiving compliments and sharing her vision for the space. Anthony watched, her with pride, talking with investors and representatives of social organizations interested in replicating the model. Michael, in turn, had assumed the role of junior host, proudly showing everyone the details he had helped plan, especially the adaptations for people in wheelchairs. During a quiet moment at the party, Rose found herself alone for an instant in the cafe's old kitchen, now modernized but still maintaining some original elements. She looked at the framed photo of her mother that she had placed on the wall. I hope you're proud, Mom, she whispered. Your cafe continues to be a place of comfort just for many more people now. She felt a presence behind her and turned to find Anthony. She would be immensely proud, he said softly, as I am. He hugged her from behind, both contemplating the photo. You know what I like most about you, Rose? Your ability to transform situations. To see beyond problems and envision possibilities, you transformed a chance encounter into a new life for all of us. Rose smiled, turning in his arms to face him. I didn't do it alone. It was a road built by three, you, me, and Michael. Anthony nodded, agreeing. And it's just the beginning of our journey together. Outside, the guests were celebrating not just the inauguration of a renovated cafe, but the birth of a concept that could spread and transform lives. Michael's laughter could be clearly heard, bringing joy to Rose's heart. From a rainy night when a lonely boy in a wheelchair got separated from his father, a story of love, overcoming, and transformation was born. Comfort Cafe, which had always been a refuge of human warmth, now became the symbol of a new phase in the lives of Rose, Anthony, and Michael, a phase of inclusion, acceptance, and above all, true love. And as Rose and Anthony returned to the party, hand in hand, they knew that the future still held many challenges, but they were ready to face them together, as the family they had become. The end. Dear listener, did this story touch your heart? Share your impressions with us. Where are you listening from? Do you think Rose made the right choice by accepting Anthony's proposal? Don't forget to leave your like and especially subscribe to the channel for more soul-warming stories.